Hey folks, uh, in this video we're going to talk a little bit about some of the early progress on scientific and anthropological discovery of early man. Um, in the Neander Valley in Germany and France, there had been discoveries of Neanderthals back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. We've also, in the 1970s, I believe, uh, we have the discovery of Lucy in Africa. And your book will talk a little bit more about Lucy, and we'll also talk about some Neanderthals as well. Um, Likewise, in the Alps, in between Italy and Austria, yeah, Uh, we also have the discovery of Ötzi the Iceman, and he was discovered, I think, in 1990-ish. Um, and so most of the research and information that we have on early humanity is comes from these anthropological finds. Uh, Most of the time, 99% of the time, these people are absolutely wanting to further the science, further, fill in the gaps of human history. Unfortunately, sometimes people want to make a name for themselves and want to be just remembered for adding to this story, and will uh, they will commit fraud in trying to further that aim of making themselves famous. And the book does a pretty good job of talking about Lucy, talking about Neanderthals. One area it doesn't talk about those cases of fraud, and I kind of find those particularly interesting. Um, in 1909, in England, in a town called Piltdown, Piltdwn. In Piltdown in 1909, a skull was discovered, and it looked very much just like a human skull, but a lot thicker, a lot more of a pronounced brow ridge, larger canine teeth, things like that. And a short while before that, within the last 50 years, Neanderthals had been discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany and France. And so this is a new discovery. This is a very exciting discovery in 1909. And at the time, there was an interesting sort of race in European countries to find out which country had evidence of the oldest man in those European countries. Uh, and every country in Europe, oh, well, not every country, but a lot of the countries in Europe wanted to kind of get in on this race to be the central focus for the birth of modern humanity. There was a really big effort to sort of push this. And in a couple of years later, in 1912, a man named Charles Dawson, Dawson, wrote to the British Museum about his discovery that had occurred back in 1909. It hadn't gotten a whole lot of attention. He was trying to drum it up a bit. He wrote to the British Museum that he had found early man fossils that, in his words, might rival Germany's ape man, talking about Neanderthals again. And he spent the summer excavating, and he got some funding. He found some tools as well as a jawbone that seemed to mesh with the earlier skull. And as a whole, the English people were wildly excited about this. It was possible that they found the earliest link between modern humans and apes, and it was British. And so they were tremendously excited about this, that they had found possibly the missing link in England. The town of Piltdown became world famous through the discovery of Eanthropus dawsoni, the supposed missing link. And in 1917, a few years later, Dawson discovered a second Piltdown skull. This person, the skulls, this species was named Piltdown Man. He discovered a second skull about 2 miles away, and now it seemed like we have an undisputed early human ancestor, in close proximity to the town of Piltdown. Winston Churchill even remarked on this, calling these two skulls the lords of creation. And unfortunately, for the next 40 years, Piltdown Man seemed to fit into the evolutionary timeline, with anthropologists building their research and sometimes their careers on these fossils that were associated with that one particular dig. In 1953, though, it was revealed that both of those fossils were fake. Uh, they were for 40 years. These had both been hoaxes, and they had sidetracked archaeologists and anthropologists. Most of the skull of both Piltdown men were revealed to be parts of ape skulls. Chemical tests determined to age the fossils revealed that they were simply artificially stained. And the teeth of those ape skulls, probably an orangutan, were filed down to make them look to be more human. So these were not fossilized at all. They were just, relatively recent orangutan skulls. This is terrible because, not only did this sidetrack a lot of science, but a lot of people built their research and their careers on figuring out where Piltdown Man fit into the evolutionary chain. And all of the science and all of the effort that was done on that was basically worthless. And today we still aren't quite super sure of who pulled this off. The person that did this never revealed himself. We do have some suspects. They're a small number, and I don't fall into this group, but there are a small number of people that believe that the person that pulled this off originally was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the writer of the Sherlock Holmes series. He was very much into science, and some of that bled into his books. Unfortunately, though, some of the archaeologists at the time shunned him. Doyle dabbled a little bit in spiritualism that was still a little bit lingering at the time. It had started back in the 1850s with ideas of people trying to contact the dead and having conversations with the dead. And some of these more hard-minded science folks and archaeologists really kind of shunned him and called him a fool. And there's some argument that maybe Piltdown Man was an effort by him to sort of get back at these people. I tend to think, and I think probably more historians and anthropologists on that side as well, find the more convincing suspect to be Charles Dawson himself. Sorry, I almost said Darwin. Charles Dawson himself, the actual discoverer of these artifacts. He was an amateur archaeologist. He wanted to make a name for himself. And it's inexcusable that he did this, but it's understandable that he did have this motive. After Dawson's, both of his Piltdown men were discovered to be fakes, a lot of his other supposed discoveries were re-examined more closely. And a lot of them were found to be fakes as well. He claimed to have found some early Roman tiles in England. Those were discovered to be faked. Somewhere in the neighborhood, I'm not sure how many total discoveries that he had, but 46 of all of his archaeological discoveries turned out to be fake. And so I tend to side on with the group that argues that Charles Dawson was probably the primary culprit in this whole fiasco. But yeah, it's sometimes, it's probably 99% of archaeologists and anthropologists are honest people, but sometimes you get these guys that do sort of throw a monkey wrench in the works. Anyway, that would be an interesting topic for your article later on if you wanted to look further into Piltdown Man and see how this impacted archaeology and stuff like that. That would be something interesting to look into if you'd like to go down that path. But anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks.